"Security! Stop her! She's stealing the diamond necklace!" The words didn't just cut through the gala hall, they detonated, shattering the delicate symphony of clinking champagne flutes and murmured pleasantries. Violins screeched to a halt mid-note, the sound dying in the air like a wounded bird. Above, the crystal chandeliers, which had moments ago seemed to be weeping light, now hung like 1,000 glittering daggers poised to fall. The entire room, a swirling sea of tuxedos and silk gowns, turned as one entity, their collective gaze a physical force that crashed down upon a single figure in a burnt orange dress. But she was not clutching diamonds. She was clutching silence. A silence so profound, so heavy, it suddenly seemed to weigh more than all the gold and jewels in the room combined. The murmurs began instantly, spreading through the crowd like a contagion, sharper and more venomous than the sting of cheap wine. Eyes narrowed. A jeweled hand, skeletal and white, pointed from across the room. And for the woman standing in the center of it all, it was not the first time an entire room had looked at her and decided, without evidence or trial, that she did not belong. Before we dive deeper into this abyss, I have to ask you, where are you watching this from? Is it day or night in your corner of the world? Drop your city, your state, your country in the comments below. Let us know you're here. And if you believe that a person's dignity is more precious than any diamond, then smash that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. Your support fuels our fire to tell the stories that matter, the ones they don't want you to hear. We're glad you're a part of this. Now, back to her. Her name had not been whispered yet, not in this room. In this cathedral of wealth and privilege, names were currency, and she, in their eyes, was bankrupt. All they saw was a black woman in a stark, unadorned orange dress that fell to her ankles. Her hair was pulled back, low and severe, into a tight knot at the nape of her neck. She stood in the blinding glare of their collective suspicion, a solitary island in a sea of contempt. There was no glittering necklace on her collarbone, no designer logo stitched ostentatiously into her fabric, no gaudy display of wealth to justify her presence. And in the twisted, perverted logic of the gala, that very absence was its own damning evidence, its own irrefutable crime. A woman in a silver sequin gown, her face a mask of practiced indignation, strode forward, her voice, sharp and thin, sliced through the hush. I saw her. She was lingering by the display case. She must have taken it when no one was looking. She gestured dramatically toward a velvet-draped glass pedestal, where, just moments before, a diamond necklace had shimmered beneath a dedicated spotlight. The space was now starkly, accusingly empty. The manager of the gala, a man whose ambition had far outpaced his character, wasted no time. His face, already flushed from champagne, deepened to a blotchy, furious red. He needed to control this. He needed to be the hero. He boomed, his voice unnaturally loud, ensuring everyone could hear his performance of authority. "Ma'am, you will hand over your bag, right now." The air in the room thickened, growing heavy and suffocating. Guests shifted their weight, their lips curling into smug, knowing smirks. The humiliation was the real entertainment tonight. One man, his tuxedo collar too tight, whispered to his companion, "It's always the same story, isn't it?" Another guest, a woman dripping in emeralds, scoffed audibly. "She really thought she could just blend in here? How naive." The woman in orange did not move. Her shoulders remained level, her posture unbroken. Her gaze was steady, as if anchored to some invisible point in the chaos, a lighthouse against the crashing tide of contempt. A server in a crisp white jacket, no older than 20, stepped forward with a cruel smirk playing on his lips. He held a walkie-talkie, lifting it with a flourish. "Possible theft in progress," he muttered into the static, his voice dripping with theatrical importance. "Sending security to the main hall." The call was just loud enough for the nearest tables to hear clearly. It was meant to be. It was part of the show. Around her, a forest of smartphones tilted upward. Some were filming, eager to capture the drama for their social media feeds. Others were already texting, spreading the gossip like wildfire. One journalist, a young woman barely 25 with fire in her eyes, whispered urgently to her companion, "This is profiling. This is textbook. Get this on record." She pressed her own phone's record button, her lens a silent, unforgiving witness to the unfolding injustice. The accused woman finally raised her eyes. For a breathtaking moment, the room quieted. Not out of respect, but from the unnerving, almost unnatural calm that clung to her like a shroud. Her voice, when it finally came, was low, even, almost too measured for the storm raging around her. "Search if you must," she said, her words dropping into the silence like stones into a still pond. "The truth will not change." The manager sneered at her words, mistaking her profound patience for weakness, her composure for guilt. He lunged for her small clutch bag, ripping it from her grasp with a savage tug. He upended it on the nearest marble-topped table. A lipstick, a set of keys, and a folded program tumbled out. Mundane, ordinary objects that landed on the cold stone like pieces of damning evidence. And then, from across the hall, a new voice shouted, a young man in a perfectly tailored suit, his face alight with a hero's fervor. He held up the diamond necklace, its facets catching the chandelier's light and fracturing it into a million tiny, accusing shards. "She tried to take this. I caught her!" Gasps rippled through the hall, a collective intake of breath. Laughter, sharp and brittle, followed from a corner where champagne glasses glittered. The necklace glared under the lights, each diamond a tiny, cold eye staring at her, judging her. The crowd leaned in, a single organism hungry for a spectacle, ravenous to confirm what they had already decided to believe. The woman in the orange dress did not flinch. She had seen this theater before. Different stages, different costumes, but always the same script. And as the voices swelled around her, a storm was gathering, one she had been preparing for long before she ever stepped foot into this hall of mirrors. The necklace hung in the air like a guilty verdict already delivered. Its diamonds fractured the chandelier's light into jagged shards that cut across the faces of the rapt audience. The young man who held it aloft, his tuxedo collar now seeming to choke him with self-importance, spoke louder this time, projecting to the back of the room. "Caught her red-handed. She thought nobody would notice her slip it into her bag." His words landed like a gavel, final and sharp. Laughter erupted in small, cruel pockets of the room. A woman in a fur stole, an animal carcass draped over her shoulders, shook her head with a display of mock pity. "They always pretend to belong," she sighed to her companion, "and it's always the same sordid ending." Another guest took a slow, deliberate sip of champagne, smirking over the rim of his glass, as if the humiliation unfolding before him was part of the exclusive entertainment he had paid for. The manager of the gala, red-faced and sweating under the hot lights, puffed his chest out with an authority he had not earned but was desperate to project. He pointed a trembling finger toward the woman in the orange dress. "Ma'am, you are trespassing in more ways than one. Hand over any other jewelry you are concealing, or we will escalate this, violently." His voice carried over the silent strings of the violins that had long since stopped playing. The silence in the hall was heavy, thick with judgment, broken only by the soft, insidious clicking of cameras as more and more guests began recording. She did not flinch. Her small clutch lay empty and violated on the table. Its contents were displayed like relics of a failed life. A tube of lipstick, a set of car keys, a folded program. Nothing else. Nothing of value. And yet the assumption had already metastasized into conviction in the eyes staring at her. The narrative was written before she ever stepped into the room. Her skin color, her simple dress, her quiet demeanor. It was all the proof they needed. A security guard, tall and broad as a brick wall, strode through the parting crowd, his radio still hissing with static in his hand. "Step aside," he ordered, his voice a low growl. He reached for her arm, his grip far rougher than protocol required, his fingers digging into her flesh. "You will wait outside until the police arrive." The woman's gaze lifted slowly, steady as stone, meeting his. "I will not move," she said, her voice a quiet river against his raging torrent, "until the truth is seen by everyone in this room." The calm in her tone clashed violently with the rising fury around her. It unsettled some. It enraged others. From the corner, the young journalist who had been filming raised her voice, a lone note of dissent in a symphony of prejudice. "This is not procedure. This is profiling." She showed her invitation when she entered. "I saw it with my own eyes." Her words echoed, thin and fragile against the overwhelming tide of disdain. The manager turned on her sharply, his voice dripping with scorn. "Do not interfere, little girl. You have no idea how these scams work. People like her slip in, flash fake invitations, and walk away with millions in jewels before anyone is the wiser." He gestured at the woman in orange, as if she were not standing right there, a human being, but an exhibit in a museum of criminality, an object for ridicule. Gasps mixed with satisfied whispers. A man in a navy suit, his phone's camera tilted higher to catch the manager's face in the frame, muttered just loud enough for those around him to hear, "People like her." He said it. He actually said it outright. The woman's shoulders remained squared, her spine a rod of steel. Her hair, pulled low at the nape of her neck, caught the light without sparkle, a silhouette of absolute control. She breathed once, a slow, even inhale and exhale, while the security guard tightened his grip, trying to assert a dominance she refused to acknowledge. A sudden shout came from across the hall. "That's theft!" A middle-aged woman with a shock of gray hair had pointed, not at the accused, but at the necklace still raised in the young man's hand. "She never touched it. You lifted it from the pedestal yourself." Her voice cracked through the murmurs, a desperate plea for reason, daring others to look closer, to question the narrative they were being fed. But the tide was already set. The manager ignored her completely, waving her protest away like a puff of smoke. "We've seen this 1,000 times. Every time the story is the same. A high-value item goes missing, and we find a stranger who cannot prove she belongs here." He turned back toward the woman in orange, his eyes glittering with a cruel victory. "You will not talk your way out of this, not tonight." The circle around her tightened. Guests leaned forward, their faces a grotesque gallery of expressions. Disgust, morbid thrill, but precious few showed compassion. The very architecture of the hall seemed to lean in, the walls closing, waiting for her to fall. And still, she stood silent, unmoving, as if every insult, every grab, every false charge was only stacking more weight upon a foundation she had built long before this night, a foundation of resilience forged in the fires of 1,000 similar injustices. The pressure in the gala hall swelled until even the chandeliers seemed to tremble with the unspoken tension. The security guards tightened their circle, their presence a physical manifestation of the room's judgment. The manager stepped closer, his voice sharpened into a weapon of pure cruelty. "Empty-handed and already caught. Tell me," he sneered, his face inches from hers. "Do you really think you can buy your way out of this? That necklace is worth $5 million. You don't belong in the same room with it, let alone near it." His words were spit, not spoken. The accusation, the raw, unvarnished prejudice, cracked something in the air. The phrase, "you don't belong," was not new to her, but here, under the glare of 1,000 crystal lights and the unblinking eyes of dozens of cameras, it carried the weight of centuries. A young server near the back of the room shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flicking between the woman in orange and the apoplectic manager. He was new. He needed this job. But for the first time, a hot flush of shame began to creep into the edges of the crowd, a silent acknowledgement of the ugliness on display. She remained still, her voice a low, powerful current beneath the raging storm of their hatred. "Search me again," she invited. "Tear apart every seam of this dress if you must. You will still not find what you are looking for." The young man clutching the necklace puffed up his chest, his grin more of a performance than a genuine expression of conviction. "We already found it. You just can't admit it. Thieves never do." He turned towards the guests, a performer playing to his audience, holding the necklace higher like a hard-won prize. Laughter scattered across the hall, brittle and eager to believe the lie. A memory, sharp and painful, cut through her calm. 16 years old, standing in the opulent lobby of a hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina, dressed in her Sunday best after church. A clerk had looked her up and down, his gaze lingering on her skin, and said with a dismissive wave, "Guests only, you need to step outside." They hadn't listened when she tried to explain that her parents were just parking the car. They had escorted her, a child, to the sidewalk, leaving her there to be stared at like a trespasser. That shame, that burning humiliation, had not shrunk her. It had carved her into something sharp, something enduring. Back in the gala, the same dismissive tone echoed in the manager's command. "Take her outside, now! She is wasting our time and ruining this evening for our legitimate guests." The security guard's hand tightened on her arm, preparing to drag her. The crowd parted to make way, phones lifted higher to capture her walk of shame. Some whispered, some sneered, some smirked, as though her public degradation was the finest entertainment their tickets could buy. Then, a voice pierced the hall. Elena Ruiz. A junior staff member, barely older than 20, stepped forward from the corner where she'd been arranging napkins. Her voice trembled, but it was clear as a bell. "I saw her name on the guest list this morning, executive tier. Her invitation was valid." The entire room stuttered. The collective narrative glitched. Cameras swung toward the young woman, this unexpected witness. The manager snapped his head around, his anger now feral, cornered. "One more word out of you and you will lose your job. Do you understand me?" Elena swallowed hard, her hands shaking at her sides, but her eyes stayed fixed on the woman in the orange dress. A silent, powerful connection passed between them. "I will not lie for you," she said, her voice small but unbreakable. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than any shout. The manager's jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. He waved a frantic hand toward security with what was left of his authority. "Escort them both out. Now!" The guard pulled at the woman's arm again, harder this time, trying to force her compliance. Gasps rippled through the room as she refused to move, her feet seemingly rooted to the marble floor like ancient stones. She turned her head slightly, her voice no longer for the guard, but for the entire crowd. "You call me a thief without proof. You strip my dignity without cause, but you will all see soon enough. The truth is far more expensive than your lies." Whispers exploded. The journalist's phone caught every word. Her livestream chat was a waterfall of disbelief and outrage. "They're profiling her in front of everyone. She's still so calm. She's still standing." The man with the necklace smirked again, a desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. You think being calm will save you? You think silence makes you innocent? People like you always fold when the police arrive? But she did not fold. She stood taller. And as the crowd leaned in, as the tension wound tighter and tighter, it became terrifyingly clear that something was about to break. And it wasn't going to be her. The murmur of the crowd rose into a low, menacing roar. Conversations splintered into fragments, some now daring to defend her, but most still condemning her. The chandeliers hummed above, their thousands of crystals scattering light like tiny, sharp knives across her skin. The manager, sensing his grip on the situation failing, gestured sharply, his words now pure acid. "She is a fraud. Call the police immediately. Let her explain her pack of lies and handcuffs." The security guard's grip dug deeper into her arm, a final brutal attempt at dominance. But her face remained a mask of unreadable calm. She turned her head slowly, meeting the guard's eyes with a gaze of calm steel. "If you put your hands on me again," she said, her voice not shouted but delivered with an even, terrifying precision, "you will regret it more than you can possibly imagine." The words, though quiet, carried a weight that silenced even the nervous laughter from the back of the hall. The guard's hand froze. The young journalist's voice quivered, but it carried across the suddenly still room. "This is being recorded live. Thousands of people are watching this happen right now. Do you really want this to be the legacy of your gala?" She panned her phone deliberately across the crowd, catching faces caught between their doubt and their complicity. Some guests lowered their gaze, suddenly unwilling to be immortalized in a scandal. Others stared directly into the lens, unashamed of their prejudice. The manager's sneer deepened into a grotesque mask. "You think a little video scares us? We have lawyers. We have influence. We decide who belongs here." His hands swept across the glittering room, as if to erase her very presence with a single, arrogant gesture. From the pedestal, the young man with the necklace shouted louder, desperate to regain his role as the hero. "Look at her. She can't even afford the shoes on her feet. And yet, we are supposed to believe she came here to admire diamonds worth $5 million. His tone was thick with mockery, his grin wide and cruel. A small, pathetic ripple of laughter followed his words. Her eyes narrowed, but her lips remained a firm, straight line. She remembered another night, another lifetime. Younger, exhausted from travel. At 24, she had stood at a hotel desk in Atlanta, corporate card in hand, while the clerk told her, "You don't look like someone who would stay here." The shame of that night, the raw humiliation, had fueled the blueprint for her first successful business. She had sworn to herself that no one would ever dismiss her like that again. And yet, here she was, dismissed once more. The security guard shifted uneasily. His grip finally loosened for a moment as her profound stillness unsettled him to his core. This was not the behavior of a common thief. This was not weakness. It was defiance woven into the very fabric of her silence. The plain orange of her dress caught the chandelier's light, not flashing like the jewels around her, but glowing, like a fire banked low, contained and dangerous. Then Elena spoke again, her voice louder this time, drawing strength from the other woman's resolve. "She doesn't need to prove anything to you. Her invitation is real. Her name was in the system this morning. I checked it myself." Her voice cracked with emotion, but the raw conviction inside it made several guests stir uncomfortably in their expensive shoes. The manager spun on her, his fury boiling over. "You are done here. Your job is finished. Step back, or I will have you physically removed." But Elena did not step back. She moved closer, taking a defiant stand beside the woman in orange. "I'm not moving, not this time." A hush rippled through the hall, Two women, side by side, one accused and one a defiant witness. For the first time, the balance of power in the room shifted ever so slightly. The crowd could feel it. The phones lifted higher, ready to capture every word, every defiant glance. The manager barked toward security, a new note of desperation creeping into his voice. "Remove them both immediately! Don't wait for the police! Do it now!" The guard hesitated, his eyes flicking to the growing number of cameras aimed at him. The journalist's live stream ticked higher and higher in view count. Comments were flooding in. "They're dragging her without proof. This is racial profiling live. Stay strong, Queen." The woman in the orange dress finally moved. She pulled her arm free with a single, steady motion and raised her voice just enough to be heard across the hall. "You have mistaken my silence for surrender. That will be your last mistake tonight." The words landed like a blade, cutting the room into two halves. Those who gasped in sudden, dawning recognition of the power they were witnessing, and those who bristled with denial, clinging to their prejudice. The atmosphere, once a theater of humiliation, was now shifting inexorably toward a reckoning. The storm was no longer gathering. It was already here. The storm inside the gala reached its breaking point. The orchestra's instruments rested silent and forgotten in their stands. Guests whispered urgently, their voices a sibilant hiss under the chandeliers. Some leaned into their companions, plotting their allegiances, while others pulled back, as if afraid of being caught in the crossfire of the moment. The manager, flushed with a toxic cocktail of fury and fear, slammed his hand down onto a polished marble table. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "I said, remove her now." His voice cracked on the last word, but it still rang across the hall. He pointed directly at the woman in the orange dress, his finger shaking, as if the gesture alone could condemn her. The security guard stepped forward again, his face a grim mask of determination mixed with a profound unease. He reached for her shoulder. Before his hand could make contact, she tilted her head, her eyes sharp as shards of obsidian. "Touch me again, and your career ends tonight." The absolute, bone-deep calmness of her voice froze him mid-motion. A new ripple of shock, this one laced with fear, spread through the crowd. Who was this woman? The young man, still clutching the diamond necklace like a holy relic, sneered louder, desperate to keep the narrative he had created from collapsing. "She's bluffing! She's nothing! Look at her dress! It's as plain as a servant's! And yet she expects us to believe she belongs here with $5 million around her neck?" His insult was not subtle. It was a knife, sharpened with generations of prejudice, meant to cut deep and draw blood. Gasps echoed. A woman near the back whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "He said it, plain as day. That was pure racism." Phones tilted higher, zooming in, capturing every ugly second. The journalist's live stream count climbed past 2,000 viewers. The comments were scrolling so fast they blurred into a single, furious river of text. The woman in orange remained unshaken. She turned slightly, her elegant profile catching the glow of the chandeliers. "Your words reveal far more about you than they could ever reveal about me." She let the silence that followed linger, forcing the crowd to sit in the uncomfortable weight of the truth she had not yet fully unveiled. Elena, the junior staff member who had taken her stand beside her, found her voice, stronger now. "This is wrong, all of it. You are humiliating her without a shred of proof, and I will not stand silent while you do it." Her tone, once trembling, did not waver. A few guests, emboldened by her courage, murmured their agreement. The manager whipped around, glaring at Elena with pure venom. "You will be escorted out as well. You are finished in this city." But the threat rang hollow now, a pathetic echo against the backdrop of 100 recording cameras, against the crowd's growing, dawning awareness that something much bigger than a simple theft was unfolding. The woman in orange closed her eyes briefly, as if listening to a voice only she could hear, centering herself in the vortex. A memory surfaced, clear as glass. 29 years old, standing at a 5-star hotel counter in Los Angeles. She had presented not one, not two, but 3 forms of photo identification, and still the clerk had doubted her, had called his manager to verify. She had been forced to wait for 2 hours while 3 white men checked in without a single question. That humiliation had not broken her. It had built a policy in her own global empire. 0 tolerance for profiling. 0. Her eyes opened, steady and clear as a winter sky. She spoke to the hall itself, her words carrying like a verdict from a judge. You strip my dignity without evidence. You point your fingers without truth. And yet every eye in this room is watching. Every phone is recording. So ask yourselves, who will be judged when this moment leaves these walls? The question landed with the heavy, resonant clang of a cell door slamming shut. It landed on the crowd, on the manager, on the smirking young man. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, their earlier laughter long gone. One older woman lowered her champagne flute, staring hard at the necklace in the young man's hand, really seeing it for the first time. The journalist's voice trembled as she narrated into her phone. She hasn't raised her voice once, and still, the entire room is bending around her calm. This is not weakness. This is power. The woman in orange stood taller, her low bun neat and perfect against her nape, her dress glowing like banked fire. The gala teetered on the very edge of collapse. Justice had not yet been spoken, but its presence was pressing in on all of them, heavy and undeniable. The crowd could feel it. The end of this humiliation would not be her silence, it would be a revelation. The hall had become a furnace of tension. Every gaze burned toward the woman in orange. The air vibrated with accusation, but beneath it, something else was growing. Anticipation, as if the crowd could sense the tectonic plates of power were about to shift violently beneath their feet. The manager's voice cracked the silence again, louder, harsher, almost desperate now. This event is not a stage for you to play the victim. You are a fraud. You came here to steal what you could never afford. Security! I want her out of this building before the police arrive. His words dripped with a venom that was now curdled with fear. The guard hesitated. Cameras were everywhere. The journalist's phone had already reached more than 3,000 live viewers. The comment feed scrolled like a wildfire. Outrage and disbelief were igniting with every passing second. The guard's hand hovered, uncertain, suspended between obedience to his superior and the primal fear of the backlash already boiling over in the room and across the internet. The young man with the necklace sneered again, his arrogance a brittle shield against the doubt creeping into his own eyes. Do you see how she stands there? Silent. As if silence proves anything. It proves guilt. People like her always think their calmness will save them. But calmness can't buy diamonds worth $5 million. His voice rose, sharp and triumphant, as though he were delivering a closing argument in a trial he had already won. A wave of murmurs swept across the room, but this time, they were different. One man whispered to his companion, "Why does he keep saying people like her?" Another guest, an older woman adorned in pearls, muttered, "Because he wants everyone to hear the prejudice he can't be bothered to hide." The woman in orange finally moved. It was not a rushed movement, not a panicked one. She lifted her chin, her eyes sweeping across the sea of faces. The chandeliers painted her own face in fractured light, not soft, but jagged, like the truth she carried. Her voice came out steady, low, but unmistakably firm. "You call me a thief. You call me unworthy. But the only thing that has been stolen here tonight is dignity, and it was not stolen from me. It was stolen by you." The words struck the hall like a physical blow. The last vestiges of laughter died instantly. Even the young man with the necklace faltered, his grin flickering with uncertainty. Elena's voice broke the ensuing silence, louder this time, bolder than before. "She is telling the truth. Her name was marked in the system with executive clearance. I saw it. I logged it myself." Her shoulders shook, but her conviction was solid as a rock. "You are humiliating a guest who has every right to stand in this room." The manager whipped around, his features twisted with fury. "Enough, you're lying. You're protecting a criminal." He turned back to the crowd, trying desperately to pull them back into his orbit. "This is how the scam works. They come in with fake credentials, fake stories, and leave with millions." But the crowd was no longer so sure. The journalist whispered urgently into her phone. "The tide is shifting. People are not laughing anymore, they are questioning." Her viewers flooded the stream with comments. "This is profiling. She is innocent. Expose them all." The woman in orange stood motionless, her silence now speaking louder than any accusation. She was no longer the accused. She was a mirror, and the entire room was being forced to look at its own ugly reflection. Finally, she turned her gaze directly on the manager. Her words were a blade, each syllable honed to a razor's edge. "You mistook my silence for submission. That was your last mistake." Gasps erupted. A woman near the bar dropped her glass, the sound shattering against the marble floor. Guests leaned closer, no longer out of morbid curiosity, but because they sensed something irreversible, something monumental was about to unfold. The gala was no longer a celebration. It had become a trial, and the verdict was closing in. The marble floor echoed with the sharp, final clatter of the shattered champagne glass. The sound hung in the air, a punctuation mark on the evening's ugliness that none could ignore. The manager's face flushed a deep crimson, his authority slipping like sand through his open fingers. His voice cracked as he barked, a last-ditch effort to sound in command. "Enough of this performance! Return the necklace to the display and escort her out before this spectacle ruins the entire evening." The young man holding the necklace grinned, momentarily emboldened by the command. He raised the diamonds higher, the facets scattering shards of light across the anxious faces of the crowd. "You heard him. She thought she could just walk in here and take what isn't hers. But the necklace is safe now, thanks to me." He puffed out his chest, his arrogance dripping from every syllable like poison. The woman in the orange dress did not move. Her stillness was a mockery of his frantic display. Her voice, when it came, was measured and low, yet it carried across the hall as if the air itself had leaned closer to hear her. "What you are holding does not belong to you, nor does it belong to this gala, and it certainly does not belong to your pride. You raise it like a trophy, but all I see is theft parading as honor." Gasps rippled through the room. A man in the front row frowned, his brow furrowed. "She's right," he said to his wife. "He was the one who lifted it from the pedestal." A woman nearby added, her voice gaining strength. "I watched him do it too. She never went near it." The manager shot them both a withering glare. "Silence yourselves. You're being manipulated by her calm act. That necklace has a value of $5 million. She could never afford it. This entire charade is meant to trick us all." His words were loud, but they no longer carried the same weight. Doubt had begun to creep into the corners of the crowd, like a rising fog. The journalist raised her phone higher. "Listen to him," she whispered for her thousands of viewers. "He has no proof, only prejudice, and she has not moved an inch." Comments streamed in faster and faster. "This is racism in real time. They're framing her. Stay strong." The security guard looked profoundly uneasy, his hand loosening on his radio. The authority he had leaned on only moments before was faltering, crumbling under the relentless gaze of 100 witnesses. Then Elena stepped forward again, her voice steady and clear as a trumpet call. The reservation system marked her as executive tier. I saw her name this morning. And now you accuse her of theft because you cannot imagine she belongs in this room? The young man with the necklace turned, snarling. You're lying! You're just covering for her! He held the necklace higher, but his bravado finally cracked when he noticed that more phones were now aimed directly at him, not at her. The woman in the orange dress tilted her head, her eyes locked on him. Every second you hold that necklace is proof, not against me, but against yourself. The room fell silent. Guests shifted, deeply uncomfortable with the cold, clear clarity of her words. The necklace, once a symbol of her supposed guilt, no longer looked like evidence. It looked like a stain on the man holding it. The manager tried one last desperate push, his voice rising into a shout. You will regret challenging me. I will make sure of it. Security, drag her out now. Call the police. End this circus before it destroys our reputation. But the reputation was already burning. The crowd knew it. The cameras knew it. The gala, once cloaked in a veneer of glamour, now pulsed with the ugly, undeniable truth of its own prejudice. And in the center of it all, the woman in orange stood unmoving, unbroken, ready to turn the crushing weight of their accusations back upon them. The trial of dignity had reached its most dangerous moment. The next move would shatter what little control the accusers still believed they held. The air in the gala hall was electric, charged with something heavier than accusation. It was the charged silence before a lightning strike. Phones hovered like 1,000 tiny spotlights, capturing every tremor of fear, every sneer of contempt, every flicker of doubt. The woman in the orange dress finally moved. Her hand slid into her clutch, retrieving her own phone with a deliberate, unhurried calm. She raised it to her ear, her tone steady enough to slice through the ambient noise. Activate the protocol, she said, her voice clear and commanding. Verify the diamond transaction. Pull the full transfer record from 3 days ago. On the other end, a voice responded crisply, though the words were spoken low enough that only those nearest to her could hear them distinctly. Confirmed, ma'am. Accessing the bank logs now. Stand by. The crowd murmured. Some scoffed. A man in the back laughed outright. She's bluffing, calling some friend to pretend this is all some grand theater. Yet others leaned closer, a deep unease flickering across their faces. The manager's jaw tightened. He stormed forward, trying to physically tower over her. You think a phone call makes you legitimate? You can't erase what everyone has seen with a cheap stunt? She lowered the phone, but did not pocket it. Her voice rose just enough to be heard across the marble expanse. You wanted proof. It is coming, and when it arrives, this entire room will know who the real thief is tonight. Gasps rippled through the hall. The young man holding the necklace faltered for the first time, his grip shifting nervously on the glittering diamonds. Don't listen to her, he barked, his voice suddenly a pitch higher. She's trying to flip the story. This necklace was in her hands, I swear it. But the certainty in his tone had cracked like cheap glass under strain. Elena, still standing steadfastly at her side, lifted her chin. No, I saw you take it from the pedestal yourself. She never touched it. Her words, strong and clear, struck the room with the undeniable weight of sworn testimony. Several guests whispered their agreement, their voices rising into a chorus of doubt against the accusers. The journalists' live stream chat exploded with comments. She's playing them. Proof incoming. Expose them. The view count climbed higher and higher, the glowing numbers a rising tide of witnesses that no one in that room could silence. The manager turned on Elena, his fury now almost unhinged. "You are finished in this industry. You will never work another gala, never set foot in another respectable venue. You are destroying yourself for a complete stranger." Elena stood firm, her voice shaking but unyielding. "She is not a stranger. She is a guest, and I will not betray the truth for a paycheck." The woman in orange raised her phone again. "Yes, patch it through," she said quietly. Then she held the device outward, turning up the volume. A new voice, crisp and professional, rang from the speaker, amplified by the hushed, reverent silence of the hall. "Transaction confirmed. A diamond necklace, item number 74B, purchased under Carter Holdings. Transfer amount $5 million. The payment was cleared 3 days ago." The words landed like thunder. The crowd erupted. Some gasped, some shouted, others stumbled back in sheer disbelief. The young man dropped the necklace into his own hands, as if it had suddenly become white-hot. It dangled awkwardly from his fingers, no longer a trophy, but damning evidence of his lie. The manager froze, all the color draining from his face. "No," he stammered. "No, that can't be possible. She couldn't." But the truth was already alive in the room, a living, breathing entity. The phones had captured it. The guests had witnessed it. The gala that began in a shower of glitter now trembled under the immense weight of its own exposure. And in the center of it all, the woman in orange stood unwavering. Her silence was no longer defensive. It was commanding. It was final. The shift had begun, and nothing the accusers did now could stop the tide that was crashing down upon them. The gala hall erupted into pure chaos. Gasps turned into shouts of outrage, whispers into full-throated arguments. Some guests stepped back, their faces flushed with the shame of their complicity. Others leaned in, hungry to see the downfall of those who had dared to humiliate her. The chandeliers swayed slightly overhead, as if even the building itself trembled at the magnitude of the truth that had just been revealed. The journalist's phone shook in her hand as she whispered into her live stream, her voice filled with awe. "You all heard it. $5 million. The necklace was purchased under her name 3 days ago. The proof is undeniable." The comments on her screen scrolled faster than her eyes could follow. "Justice. They lied to frame her. She owns it." The young man, still clutching the necklace, looked as though the ground had opened up beneath him. His smug grin was gone, replaced by a sickly pallor. His fingers trembled as the diamonds caught the light, no longer appearing brilliant but damning. He stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. I must have been mistaken. I thought I saw—" His voice withered under the collective weight of the crowd's disgust. The manager's face turned ashen, but his pride, his last remaining possession, forced him forward. He raised his hands, his voice cracking as he shouted, "Do not believe this stunt. A recording can be forged. She is tricking all of you. This entire event is being hijacked by her lies." But his protest rang hollow, swallowed by the murmurs of doubt that were spreading like fire across the hall. The woman in the orange dress finally stepped closer to the center of the room. Her every movement was slow, deliberate, unshaken. Her voice cut through the noise like a bell tolling in a cathedral. "You accused me of stealing what I already own. You stripped my dignity in front of strangers and cameras. But you forgot one fundamental truth. My silence does not mean weakness. It means patience, and tonight my patience has ended." Her words were met with a stunned quiet. Even the chandeliers seemed to still. Guests leaned forward, unable to look away. She pointed towards the necklace, still shaking in the young man's hand. "Return what is mine." He hesitated, his lips parting, but no words came out. The necklace slipped from his nerveless grasp, clattering onto the marble table beside her. The sound rang out sharp, final. She did not reach for it. Instead, she let it lie there, cold and glittering, proof that her dignity had never depended on diamonds. Elena's voice rose from her side, clear and fierce. The truth is visible to everyone now. The only thieves in this room are the ones who tried to frame her. A few guests began to clap, hesitant at first, then firmer. The applause spread in pockets throughout the hall, while others stood frozen, guilt etched deeply onto their faces. The journalist captured it all, her voice trembling with awe. She has turned the entire hall with nothing but the truth and her composure. The manager's authority had completely shattered. His voice faltered as he tried one last time. Security! Remove her! Remove them both! This is an outrage! But the guard did not move. His eyes, wide with a mixture of unease and a newfound respect, met hers for a fleeting second. He saw no criminal. He saw a power he could not touch. Slowly he lowered his radio and took a deliberate step back. The woman in orange straightened her shoulders, her gaze sweeping across the stunned crowd. You tried to write me into your story of theft and shame, but I write my own story, and tonight I am the author of yours. Gasps and murmurs filled the hall again, no longer of accusation, but of recognition. The tide had fully turned. The woman who had entered under a cloud of suspicion now stood as judge, jury, and witness. And the night that began in raw prejudice had become a stage for irrefutable truth. The hall was no longer a celebration. It was a courtroom. Every crystal on the chandeliers glittered like 1,000 watchful eyes. Every phone in the crowd glowed like a juror's record. The woman in the orange dress stood tall at the center, her presence burning brighter than the diamonds that had been used to shame her. The manager's voice shook as he tried to claw back a shred of control. You don't understand. She manipulated this. This proof isn't real. This whole display is a trick. His words stumbled over each other, desperate and hollow. The young man who had raised the necklace so triumphantly only moments before looked smaller now, his shoulders sagging, his expensive tuxedo hanging limp on him. His voice cracked. I was told she shouldn't be trusted. I thought. His pathetic excuses trailed off into the thick silence. The necklace lay abandoned on the marble table, its shine dull compared to the fire in her eyes. Guests began to speak openly now, their voices no longer whispers, but testimony. A man in a navy suit said loudly, "I saw you pull that necklace from the pedestal, not her." A woman in pearls added, "And I heard every word you said. People like her." We all heard it. The journalist's live stream swelled with triumphant energy, her words carried like a chorus, amplified by thousands watching from around the world. The crowd is turning. They see it. They know the truth now. Comments flooded her feed. Expose them. Justice is happening right now. This is history. The woman in orange lifted her chin, her low bun catching the fractured light. She did not need to raise her voice. The hall bent toward her, waiting. You wanted me silent. You wanted me small. You wanted me guilty before the trial ever began. But tonight, every lie you have built collapses under its own weight. She stepped toward the table. The sound of her heels striking the marble echoed like a drum beat. She did not reach for the necklace. Instead, she placed her hand flat on the cool table beside it, as if anchoring herself to something far deeper and more valuable than jewels. This necklace was mine long before I walked into this room, but now it is worth more than money. It is the proof that your prejudice cannot erase my name. Gasps filled the air. A few guests applauded quietly, and then more joined in. their clapping uneven, awkward, but real. Others lowered their heads, unwilling to meet her powerful gaze. The manager shouted, his last weapon desperation. "Enough! This event is mine! My authority decides who belongs here." Her eyes locked on him, calm, unbreakable. "You do not own this truth, and you have never owned me." The security guard, the one who had once gripped her arm with such bruising force, now took another step back, his head lowered. His silence was its own profound admission of guilt. The crowd watched as the guard's radio was slipped back onto his belt, unused. Elena stood firm at her side, her voice ringing clear. "It's over. Everyone in this room knows it. The only humiliation left belongs to those who tried to disgrace her." The necklace lay still on the table, no longer a symbol of accusation, but a relic of a hard-won victory. The room pulsed with a new energy, a shocked recognition that they had witnessed not just a gross injustice, but its complete and total undoing. The woman in orange turned slowly, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. "You came here tonight to celebrate wealth, power, and charity. Yet you revealed something far uglier than poverty. You revealed the true cost of prejudice, and tonight I have paid that cost in full." The chandeliers seemed to dim under her words, as if even the light understood that its place was to follow her. The gala, once dripping with diamonds and arrogance, was now drenched in truth. And the truth was radiant, undeniable, and entirely hers. The silence that followed her words was thunderous. The crowd no longer looked at her as an intruder. They looked at her as a reckoning. The manager's authority had crumbled into dust. His lips moved, but no sound carried. The young man beside him shrank further into himself, his hands shaking, his bravado completely gone. Then her voice rose again, sharper this time, cutting through the weight of the moment like a surgeon's scalpel. "Effective immediately, all contracts tied to this gala are void. Every sponsorship dollar, every partnership agreement, every cent of funding tied to Carter Holdings is withdrawn as of this moment." The declaration struck the room like a lightning bolt. Gasps tore through the hall. A banker in the corner dropped his glass. A woman near the front clutched her pearls, as if the gems themselves had trembled. She did not stop. "And security," she said, her voice now like ice. "You will escort the organizers and these two accusers out tonight. They are the ones who do not belong." The guards, who had once been so eager to pull her away, now turned on the very people who had weaponized them. They moved with a visible hesitation, but also with the undeniable weight of new orders that could not be ignored. The manager stumbled back, his face pale with shock. "You can't do this," he hissed. "You can't ruin us in our own hall." Her gaze was glacial, unwavering. "This is not your hall anymore. Tonight, it belongs to the truth." Phones rose higher, recording the stunning reversal in real time. The journalist whispered into her microphone, awe in every syllable. "She just pulled millions of dollars from this event. The organizers are being escorted out. This is history. This is justice." The crowd parted as the guards ushered the disgraced accusers toward the exit. Their pathetic protests rang hollow, drowned out by the applause that began to spread, first in cautious claps, then swelling into a tidal wave of sound. For the first time that evening, the sound filling the gala was not one of accusation, but of vindication. The woman in the orange dress stood at the center of it all, her shoulders squared, her silence now reigning like a crown. She had not raised her voice. She had not begged. She had not surrendered. She had commanded, and the room had obeyed. The gala hall was transformed. What had begun as a theater of public humiliation was now a stage of profound vindication. The accusers were gone, their protests fading into the indifferent night. The guests who remained stood in a stunned silence, some ashamed, others inspired, but all of them forever changed by what they had just witnessed. The woman in the orange dress walked to the center of the marble floor. The necklace still rested on the table, untouched. She let it remain there, a discarded symbol of their greed and her triumph. Her presence outshone it now. Her voice filled the hall, calm, yet commanding. "You called me a thief. You tried to strip me of my dignity, but dignity is not something you can take from another person. It is something I carry. It is something I own. It is something I will never surrender." Applause erupted, scattered at first, then swelling until the sound filled the entire hall, shaking the very crystals in the chandeliers. Some guests rose to their feet, clapping with a newfound conviction. Others stood still, tears glinting in their eyes, as they realized the immense weight of what they had just witnessed. The journalist turned her camera back to the woman, her own voice breaking with emotion. She never shouted. She never begged. And yet, she brought this entire room to its knees with nothing but the truth. The comments streamed endlessly across her feed. Powerful. This is what justice looks like. I will never forget this night. The woman in orange lifted her chin one final time, her words dropping into the silence like stones into deep water, their ripples spreading out to touch everyone. "You mistook my silence for weakness, but silence is not weakness. It is power waiting for its moment. And tonight, that moment was mine." The chandeliers glittered above her, but their light seemed small and pale compared to the fire that radiated from her very being. She turned and walked steadily toward the exit, each step on the marble floor echoing like the drumbeat of triumph. The gala was left behind in a state of silence and awe. Justice had not shouted. It had spoken softly, with composure, with truth, with unshakable power. And in the end, the woman who had been accused walked out not as a victim, but as the undeniable author of her own story. What you just witnessed wasn't just a story about a necklace, it was a story about the unbreakable spirit of human dignity. If this moved you, if it made you think, please share this video. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that needs to be told. In the comments below, tell us about a time you found strength in silence. Your stories matter. Thank you for being here.